everybody, and welcome back to this week's episode of What's the Word Eagle Alumni Spotlights. I'm your host, Abby, and today we have a very special guest for you. Today we're joined with Ivana Martinez, and Ivana, why don't you give us a little bit of background about yourself?
Hello, everyone. I'm Ivana Martinez. I graduated from Riddle in December of 2023, and I started my career at Riddle back in August 2018. So it's been a while, and I've been in the school for a very long time. I'm originally born and raised in Honolulu, Hawaii, before moving to Prescott, Arizona to attend Riddle. And then after graduation, I moved all the way to the south in Huntsville, Alabama for my job really involved when I was back in college. I did a lot of things. I got bored of a lot of things, so I was pretty much everywhere. A lot of my time at Riddle was basically either A, doing stuff with my friends, or B, working on like my part-time job as an artist or doing any other things that keeps the time going.
Right, right. And you said as an artist, did you draw, paint?
There was a small club on campus that wasn't officially registered where a lot of us were music producers and were retired DJs, current DJs. So that was like our digital music group. We didn't really have an official name. We just called ourselves like, oh, we're the Riddle disc jockeys, we're the Riddle DJs. The main thing that I mainly did was a lot of digital artistry. So a lot of my times I would take commissions from, say, if I got a commission from Riot Games and they would want me to do like concept art. So that would be like my main source of quote unquote pocket change during college because you're kind of in debt from everything. You need money to buy stuff. So what I would do is I would pick up these small-time contracts from indie developers or from game companies and just kind of do a lot of conceptual art for upcoming backgrounds, kind of like characters, and pretty much just do other small-time commissions, like doing fan art for people, or if there's a convention coming up and someone wants fan art to be signed, I would do that, give them a print, and they can do whatever they please with the print.
Oh, wow, that sounds like so much fun and a good way to kind of get some pocket change, but also do what you love.
Yeah, it's definitely a really good side hustle, and that's one of the main things to do other than relying on the daddy's credit card or the part-time job.
That's always a good thing. And now, do you have a favorite memory from your time at Embry-Riddle you'd like to share with us?
I honestly can't choose what my favorite memory is because there's just throughout my five and a half, 6 years that I was at Riddle. It could be like the first starting up of our engine on the experimental Vans RV-12 aircraft with Eagle Aerosport, or teaching Dr. Lanning the modern Gen Z terms. He recently just learned what poggers mean, so he's been using that a lot in class recently. It's like, oh wow, you guys did really well on your exam. That's really poggers. Or when I snuck into one of my calculus classes in the maze wearing Heelys, and that was the first day of classes that semester. But if I had to choose one good memory, my favorite memory at Embry-Riddle was every year at graduation, I watched all my friends graduate one by one, and on the day of my graduation, they all showed up to see me walk. Throughout that time before then, they were always teasing me like, "Oh, you're next." And before the ceremony started, they told me, "Oh, now it's your turn." And not to mention I was chosen as the national anthem singer for my graduation, so that was like a really big thing too because there was over 30 applicants and I got chosen, and it's like, oh wow, that's really cool. I never like singing the national anthem for a graduation has been like a big dream for me ever since high school, so doing that checked off something off my bucket list.
Right, right. Oh, that's awesome. That's a really good memory to hang on to, especially with all the pieces that went into it.
Yeah, it was definitely a really good memory and a lot of practice too.
I can imagine so. And no, I don't think I got what you majored in.
I
Sorry.
graduated as an aerospace engineer and I decided to specialize in both aeronautics and astronautics. Unfortunately, Riddle doesn't do that hybrid course anymore, so I kind of took the liberty of doing 4 years of aeronautics and doing my year and a half to 2 years of astronautics just so I can have that one foot through the door of knowing both sides of the spectrum rather than specializing in one and then learning the other one in industry.
Right, right.
Mhm.
Oh, that's a good plan. And now, has that helped you in your current job?
Unfortunately, it hasn't. I'm doing something extremely different from what I've been studying. I currently work at EWA Warrior Services LLC. EWA stands for Electronic Warfare Association. It's a Sigma defense company where we're kind of like a defense contractor servicing the army. But now that we are part of Sigma, we are contracting out to the Navy, the Marines, and the Space Force.
Oh, wow.
Mhm.
That sounds like a very interesting job.
Really big change. I'm not anywhere near the aerospace industry now. I'm actually very close to the Department of Defense industry, so I'm keeping myself busy instead of doing aerospace work. I'm actually doing a lot of electrical engineering, software engineering, all the fun black magic major stuff that I did not exactly excel with when I was still at Riddle. So I'm learning from the ground up how everything works. How does one wire connect to the other, or how do people type in code and all of a sudden it just magically works?
Right, right. And now, with your job now, do you have a lot of writing that's involved?
Oh yeah. So as the quality engineer at EWA, I'm basically the jack of all trades, master of none. Most of my job entails that I'm ensuring that any of the defense systems and equipment that EWA produces meets the highest standards of ISO, ASME, or pretty much just the defense quality and reliability. Basically means that my work is crucial to the safety and the success of the military personnel who rely on those systems. And just recently, I had to write a safety procedures of how to use a pair of stairs because, sometimes people just need a safety procedure of how to use stairs on one of our products. And currently present in my job right now, I'm just everywhere. And when I say that, I really mean that. Like one day, I would be in like your typical engineering job in a cubicle doing conferences or documentation. And at the same day, or even like an hour later, I would be called to the manufacturing floor to oversee construction on what's going on. And a lot of like my typical day is like it's kind of like it's a very dynamic blend of technical analysis working on the manufacturing and integration floor, like I said, and a very well balanced diet of writing and hands-on work.
Okay,
Mhm.
awesome. And what genre of writing would you typically say you rely on the most?
Pretty much everything, if I were to be honest with you. Most of my stuff that I've been doing so far is having a lot of different documentation that we need to do before a product gets made. So there's three of them. In terms of our technical documentation test results, we have three different documents that we have to go through before anything gets pushed to being manufactured and like mass produced. So the first one is an IFT document, which is a initial function test. And think of it, it's kind of like a first power on test. You finished, like you turn on a computer at the store to see if it boots up and the basic functions that work. It's kind of writing when we check if all the basic parts of a system or product works as expected. And it's like plugging in a new appliance, making sure the lights turn on and the buttons respond. The second part of the technical writing aspect is a FAT, or a factory acceptance test. This is more a thorough test that happens at the factory where the product is made. Think of it as like a test drive for a car before you buy it. So we put that product through its paces to make sure it meets all the requirements and works as intended in a controlled environment. So if we were to go back to the computer example, the computer builder runs a series of tests and we do all the technical documentation for that for the test, running through different types of we're just going through a code and that code needs to run through waveforms. So the computer builder runs a series of tests with the waveforms at the shop to verify all the components are working properly and the computer meets the specifications. Lastly, the final thing that we write about is a site acceptance test or a SAT, And this is kind of like the final test that happens after the product has been delivered and installed at said location. So, with the car example, it's like taking the car for a spin in your own neighborhood to make sure it handles well on your specific roads and conditions. Like, you can't take a Ford Mustang off-roading because it's not built the same for the road that you're on. Like, if you live off-road, you can't have a sports car bringing yourself up there, you know? It's pretty much I make sure that the product works seamlessly within the customer's unique environment and make sure it works smoothly to that setup. And most of those times during those three tests, it might be spent doing a lot of drafting or editing standard operating procedures or SOP and mostly like work instructions. So writing is woven into almost everything I do, whether it be hands-on or just sitting at the computer in my cubicle. It's how we communicate complex technical information clearly and concisely, whether it's a simple email, a formal report, or telling someone what restaurant we're going to for lunch or after work, or some sort of detailed procedure. Effective writing during while doing my job is just really crucial for ensuring everyone is on the same page. And that means taking into the account of this person might not be very expert in this area, so you have to quote unquote dumb it down so everyone can be on the same page. So technical writing is the core of everything that I do, and a lot of persuasive writing if we're trying to ask someone for money, or a touch of creative writing when it comes in handy to make certain complex concepts and writing out tests that involve these fantasy settings and whatnot.
Right, right.
Mhm.
It's important to kind of cover all your bases, which it sounds like you do a really good job of.
I try to, but even when I was at Riddle, I was not a very good writer. So being thrown into a job that includes so much writing and so much proofreading it's like starting from the ground up.
Right, I can imagine. And now that leads me into my next question for you. Have you noticed any big changes between writing you're doing in the workplace and writing you did at Riddle?
Well, the first thing to point out is the quality of writing. It's undergraduates versus like seniors in the industry. So there's a big difference between stuff that you can actually understand and stuff that you could barely understand because not a lot of people know how to write in that style. Embry-Riddle definitely laid the foundation for the technical rigor I need in my writing today. The emphasis on clear, concise communication and attention to detail was invaluable. And I especially learned that during my capstone time with Dr. Haslam. And when my significant other was doing his capstone, Dr. Chesley was the communications professor for his capstone. So I kind of came in with more knowledge than the people in my capstone because I've been watching someone else's capstone for a year and getting her teachings before going into Haslam's way of teaching and kind of intertwining both of them into they're two different types of communication professors. They have a very different dynamic, and taking those two dynamics and putting them into like what I wrote out for my capstone and what I'm writing now for my job, it's kind of a wider range of genres and audiences, and it kind of requires me to adapt my writing style accordingly. So it's been an exciting challenge to apply those fundamental writing skills to the real world problems and solutions. But in terms of the difference between the two, it's really just the quality of writing. Without the teachings of Dr. Chesley and Dr. Haslam, I probably would not be a really good writer. And so far, my job has been happy with what I've been writing. So I think that's a good thing.
I would definitely say that's a good thing. And they both are great teachers. But that leads me into my final question for you today. Do you have any advice for our current Eagles?
Let's see. Oh, imposter syndrome. That is a big thing that I experience, especially in Riddle and especially at my job right now. Imposter syndrome is a feeling, not a reality. Just because you feel like a fraud doesn't mean you are one. Remind yourself of your accomplishments, skills, and the fact that you were hired or accepted for a reason. Imposter syndrome exists everywhere, in your classroom, in your workplace. It's just a feeling, not a reality. Lastly, it's okay to not graduate within 4 years. It took me 6. It's not a race, it's a marathon. Think of it like some fancy Spartan obstacle race on steroids. It will never be a failure. It's just a detour, a very scenic detour.
Perfect. And those are all great pieces of advice. But that wraps up this week's episode. Thank you, Ivana, so much for being on with us.
Yeah, of course. It's always a pleasure.
And if you are new to our podcast, be sure to find us on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. But we thank you so much for giving us a listen this week, and stay tuned for more.
This podcast is supported by the Department of Humanities and Communication at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in Prescott, Arizona. Abigail Bradbury is our host and producer. Matthew Haslam is the department chair. And I'm Amelia Chesley, Assistant Professor of Professional Writing. The intro and outro music is Wanderer by Alex. Many thanks to the Prescott Campus Writing and Design Lab for hosting our transcripts. Find us where most podcasts are found, and please do reach out if you are a Prescott Campus alum. We'd love to feature you in a future episode.